segments, guys, and now we shall transition to the NFL. As last week on episode 184 of Stats Over Politics, we were talking about our reactions to the Maxx Crosby trade as he got dealt from Las Vegas to Baltimore for 2 first-round picks. And we all remember what the trade was, and it quickly fell apart as the Raiders traded Maxx Crosby to the Ravens in exchange for a 2026 and 2027 first-round picks. But the thing that even Bleacher Report said on March 6th when they announced the news is the trade cannot be processed until next week. Well, there's a lot of things that happen in that next week. And if you haven't heard Maxx Crosby's podcast recalling what happened, check it out because it's quite entertaining. Nevertheless, on March 10th, 4 days later, the Raiders' social media platform put out a statement where it says simply, the Baltimore Ravens have backed out of our trade agreement for Maxx Crosby. We will have no further comment at this time. And everyone's heads just started exploding. It was crazy. And forgive me to the audience if my connection is not the best right now. I apologize. Hopefully I can make it through the rest of this episode. I used to have Xfinity Wi-Fi. Now I have AT&T Wi-Fi. It is cost less, but it makes a dramatic difference in our show. And so I apologize to the listeners for that. And hopefully I'm not too buffering throughout the rest of the episode. But the thing that was interesting is apparently the Ravens doctors saw Maxx Crosby's surgically repaired knee that he's currently recovering from. And they said, we have concerns. I don't know about this. And I don't believe this statement that Ravens general manager Eric DeCosta put out, but he said after losing their starting center Tyler Linderbaum to the Raiders, they were interested in pairing together Trey Hendrickson and Maxx Crosby, but Crosby's medical exam put an end to that discussion. I do not believe that at all, because I think that once they realized that they could just sign Trey Hendrickson outright and not have to give up 2 first-round picks to get Maxx Crosby, who is an extremely similar player, that they were like, his knee, that's a concern of mine. We're not doing this anymore. And they got cold feet. That's what I feel. But Kevin, how about you? What was your reaction?
I felt the same way. I have a lot of friends that are Ravens fans, and they're like, Kevin, it's not his knee. We got a better deal, A, B, C, and D. This is bad business. Any team trading with the Ravens is going to have they're going to have to look at their eyes. They're going to look at them and be like, is this really what we want to do? We just saw what they did in Maxx Crosby. This was the trade of the offseason. Like, this was the blockbuster trade we hope to see every offseason. And unfortunately, they backed out of it. And you sit here and you wonder why. If you, like Shaun mentioned, if you listen to the podcast, he mentions that his doctor said his knee is fine. Like, he's still on track to be ready for training camp, and that was always the goal. So with everyone being on the same page but the Ravens, makes you raise an eyebrow, because Maxx Crosby talked about he went there and he didn't even get to see the head coach. He didn't even get to see the GM. Like, the GM is the dude who traded for him, and he didn't even get to meet the GM. So it's like he got there, he was already like, this kind of feels weird. For a guy like Maxx Crosby to be somewhere for so long, be such a loyal guy, to kind of go through those emotions of, I'm no longer a Raider, I'm moving on, thank you, Raider Nation. 48 hours later, you're back to being a Raider. So how does this fall out with the team? Because obviously he didn't want to be there, and now he's back. So I know a lot of Raider fans that were looking forward to having those 2 first-round picks, maybe getting a Mekhi Lemon, a Jordan Tyson, add another skill receiver to the duo, or to play for Fernando Mendoza. So the Raiders were doing a lot of things, making a lot of moves. We talked on here last week about how much we loved their free agency, and now how they get to add to that free agency with 2 first-round picks, one being Fernando Mendoza, hopefully a franchise quarterback, and then a Mekhi Lemon, like I mentioned. You can go out there and get a Jordan Tyson. Like, there's a lot of things that they could have done with that 14th pick. But for the Ravens to just pull the carpet from under us and say we were going to get Henderson anyways, I don't really think that's the truth. But neither here nor there. He's back to being a Raider, and they have said they're not going to trade him. I don't think that either. But I know that his value has really diminished. But like I said, if the doctor is telling you you're fine, I think we're going to trust your doctor. He's not going to sit out here and lie to you. He's not going to lie to the Ravens sports analytics team, not analytics, but the sports team. Like, he's not going to lie to them. So if he thinks he's okay and he's the one who did the surgery and saw inside his meniscus, I think his opinion is more than just what MRI says. So Ravens, bad business, and karma's a bitch. So hopefully he doesn't come back around, and in an injury perspective, but, just them continuing to be the Ravens in the postseason. So I feel bad for Maxx Crosby.
Keith, I'm really interested to hear your perspective on this as a diehard fan of the Pittsburgh Steelers, who obviously reside in the AFC North, because not only are the Ravens not getting Maxx Crosby now, but they're getting Trey Hendrickson and taking him from another AFC North team. So what was your reaction to all this news?
You're muted.
For a second, I thought that was just me, and so I wasn't saying anything. Keith, we cannot hear. Yeah, we cannot hear you, unfortunately, Keith. From what I'm seeing on the producer panel, your mic is not muted through StreamYard, so maybe you will need to figure that out as I try to stall. But unfortunately, Keith is still dealing with some technical difficulties right now.
Here, I got something to talk about. I think it's crazy that you sign with a division rival. We saw Nakobe Dean come out here and say, yeah, I'm not going there. Like, it's crazy to think. I mean, I get it. The Bengals are a piss poor organization. They don't ever do anything to make the winning moves. But to go to your division rival and twice a year, you're good. So twice a year you got to play them, and then once a year you got to go to Cincinnati. So I think that was absolutely just fucked.
Yeah, Sorry, Keith. I was just going to say, but before we hear Keith's much anticipated take on this, I just wanted to add on to what Kevin said, is how the Bengals treated Trey Hendrickson and how they played games with him. That's exactly why he is going to their division rival and going to their most competitive division rival. No slight to your Pittsburgh Steelers, Keith, but time and time again, the Ravens have been that perennial playoff team in the AFC North up until this past year. And so, Keith, as a Steelers fan, what was your reaction to this news of the Ravens backing out of the Maxx Crosby trade with the Raiders, as I just realized I need to fix the ticker?
Well, the idea of Crosby on the Ravens, Myles Garrett on the Browns, Hendrickson was going to be gone regardless after that, and I'll get into that in a minute. I felt bad for Joe Burrow. That's the first person I thought of when I thought of this whole situation. It's like everyone's getting these, top tier pass rushers, and Joe Burrow is like, pray for me, but at least I'm going to have fun and go hang out with Jessica Alba at the craps table. So, but nonetheless, if I'm playing devil's advocate, so with the situation surrounding Maxx Crosby, I am going to have the mindset that the Ravens got cold feet. First of all, this notion that Maxx Crosby was not injured or that the Ravens were caught by surprise on some physical, that's not true. The Raiders, made it clear to every single team that was vying for Maxx Crosby, he's dealing with a torn meniscus. He's injured. Everyone knows Maxx Crosby has the torn meniscus. Now, if we're breaking this down, I'm just going off the facts here. He underwent surgery to repair the meniscus in 2026. Now, initially, it was thought he would just need a meniscus trim. Now, what's the difference? A recovery for a meniscus trim is a lot faster, obviously, than repairing a torn meniscus and going in there and getting the surgery. A trim allows a player to recover more quickly than a repair. However, the problem is that with the trims, a lot of teams believe it creates more complications down the line. It can shorten careers. Now, total meniscus repairs, they require longer recovery times, but they're more likely to produce a stable knee and fewer long-term deteriorations. So if I'm playing devil's advocate with the Ravens, I think they liked the idea of having Maxx Crosby become a Raven for 2026. What they didn't like was the concept of giving Maxx Crosby $70+ million and then having to deal with potentially a guy that's making that kind of money and the knee, the meniscus more specifically, is not stable. So I think, Shaun, you alluded to this. Once they realized they could probably get Trey Hendrickson at a discounted rate, a motivated Trey Hendrickson, because obviously the Bengals and him have just been really apart, they said, okay, let's take the trigger. Now, obviously, Maxx Crosby and Trey Hendrickson, they're two of the most elite pass rushers. But if I'm the Ravens, I look at it like this. Trey Hendrickson, all-pro in 2024, led the NFL with sacks, 17 and a half that same year. He ranked second in overall pressure with 13.2% since the Bengals signed him from New Orleans in 2021. He had 61 sacks since 2021. That's the fourth highest total out of anybody in the league. Now, the case against him is last year, obviously, he ended on IR after that procedure to repair the core muscle injury. He only played in 7 games last year. But at the same time, what is the risk and reward? What are we comparing? If we're comparing two guys that have been hurt the last couple of years, I mean, I'm not a doctor. No one is. But I would think that repairing a core muscle injury could be a lot easier than a torn meniscus. And then the other thing that Kevin alluded to that goes into this, when they realized we're about to give up the 14th pick in this year's draft, that's not like just some throwaway pick. That's the 14th pick. There's a lot of people that are in play there. You know, you don't know, like Hakeem Mesidor could be there. Jordan Tyson, we've talked about on the podcast. Mekhi Lemon could be there. But also, you could package that pick, and I hate to talk about a Buckeye, but you could package that pick, move up in the draft if he falls a little bit, and get like a Caleb Downs or a Sonny Styles, who ran a great pro day and a great 40s time. And you could bump up in the draft because there's going to be a lot of defensive players in this draft that are of high caliber. So you weigh the risk of giving a guy that's already has a bum meniscus, so to speak, that kind of money, as opposed to taking that draft pick. And if that draft pick hits, man, that's valuable for the Ravens because you're getting that guy on a rookie contract as opposed to shelling out $60 million for the next 3 to 4 years for Crosby. But again, you know, I just think they got cold feet when they realized what they were about to give up. They just said, hey, we got to pull the trigger. We can't pull the trigger right now. And I think as much as they would have loved to, the money aspect, the injury aspect, it just wasn't worth in their minds taking that risk.
So what are we going to say if Maxx Crosby goes there and has an all-pro season?
Depends on how Trey Hendrickson does, because I really think that Eric DaCosta was lying straight through his teeth about pairing them up. And so it's going to come down to the comparison, just like we see in the NBA with Luka Doncic and Trae Young after their draft night trade. And so I really think it depends on how Trey Hendrickson performs. If Trey Hendrickson comes out and has a bad year, or he gets hurt and Maxx Crosby balls out, then we're going to hear about it a lot more. But if they have fairly equal seasons, then I think it's kind of a wash.